had to say, some of the most incredible parents in the world are parents who care for kids with developmental disabilities.
Absolutely.
And too often we have people looking over their shoulder, telling them what they're doing wrong, what they should be doing better, and that these families would just as soon not have friends like that. Okay?
If you have friends like that, you don't need enemies.
And you wonder why families like this all of a sudden kind of pull back from society.
Yep.
And they do. And I know some very prominent families who are caring for kids with disabilities and that, and they don't tell anybody.
Right.
I've been in some of their homes, and I'm like, oh man, I've got a whole new respect for what kind of people you are.
Absolutely.
Now, and they don't talk about it.
Right.
And it's for two things. Number one is, you don't want to draw this kind of attention from the do-gooders and the busybodies who think they know more how to raise your kids.
Right.
You know, I have to tell you, Tom, I was a much better parent before I had kids. You know, and that's what I tell people.
That's true.
That's true. When
I wasn't a good employee until I became self-employed.
Now
I finally figured it all out.
That's right.
Oh, man.
And it's the same thing. But you know, they just it's a problem we have with people do it. And then on the other hand, you want to protect the dignity of this child. You don't want them to become a circus,
Absolutely not.
And stuff. And so when you're dealing with someone, you try to keep them out of there because they don't need someone, gawking. They just assume not. So there are families like this, and if you are so privileged to be invited in their small circle, that's an honor, and that's something you should respect, and ask, is there any way I can help? Not who shall I call to report on you.
Parents, I think, deserve what the people in the military have. I think it's called operational control. That is, if you're in the middle of a firefight and you are a lieutenant, but you get a command from a higher up, there's a thing called operational control. Based on what you know on the ground, the lieutenant can override the higher rank's decision based on operational control.
Yeah.
And this is a situation parents are in all day long, is that it is the parent's decision. If you see a parent disciplining a child, and it's the first time you've seen the kid get disciplined, you have no idea. Perhaps the parent's been riding that kid all day long to do whatever, and the kid needs retribution.
I got a quick story. I'll be fast on this. Is when we just had our third child, Debbie and I. Debbie, it took her, she had some health concerns, and then you're taking care of a newborn, and our two boys, which were 5 and 8, she wasn't giving them as much attention and oversight. And we were both pretty nervous about that because they would play with the kids in the cul-de-sac and stuff.
Sure.
And then it got to where, we felt we were beating up on ourselves, right? And the 8-year-old was making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the 5-year-old, and they were just doing more of taking care of themselves because mom had her hands full. And we really were scared. I mean, this is how much we beat up on ourselves. And then when Debbie was doing better and, getting back and stuff, a neighbor contacts me and says, hey, we just bought another house. We're getting ready to move into it. Want you to do some work on it because I'm a contractor, home improvements contractor. And so I'm over there bidding on it. And the guy says, by the way, I just want you to know, my wife and I think that you and your wife are some of the best parents we ever saw. Well, thank you. And, I didn't think much of it. And he says, you have to understand, my wife works for DHS. And her job is to decide.
Monitor.
Her job is to decide when parents are fit enough to get their kids back. And I'm like, my God! And you lived in my cul-de-sac. And then so I said, what makes you think that? And he says, well, we saw some of the neighborhood kids doing something they knew, overheard them talking about doing something. And your oldest said to his little brother, come on, Charlie, let's go home. We should not be doing that. Let's go home. Let's not. And he said, you know what? That tells me those kids are raised right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I told him, I said, my God, we were afraid DHS might find out. And the best parents are usually the ones who are overly concerned because they're already living to such a high standard they're holding themselves accountable for. And so, listen, people who are like that probably are better parents. Like the Bowles family, Yeah, they don't want to talk.
You know what? You read their Facebook pages. They care about the kids.
Yeah.
This is not something that I just don't believe everything that, and I don't believe these things anyway, especially when they're concocted and there's nothing factual. There's no fact. There's nothing there that says this is tangible. I saw X, Y, or Z, and it was valid. Everything that they supposedly saw turned out to be false.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as reported by both a nurse or a physician's assistant and a doctor who each saw both children. And I've seen the paperwork, so they both had a clean bill.